Hello and welcome to the Recovery Matters podcast from CCAR, the podcast where putting recovery first is always the goal. Here we present interviews, discussions, stories, and speeches to cultivate the understanding and acceptance of the power, hope, and healing of recovery from alcohol and other addictions. Here are your hosts, Phil and Sandy Valentine.
I'm really excited to have our son Matthew on the podcast today. Hi, Maddie.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Are you calling him Maddie or Matthew?
What would you like?
Or Matt?
Whatever you guys prefer.
What are you known at college?
Call me Matt, Matty V, Matthew.
Matty boy for me. Matty boy.
Oh, I know. He's a Matthew to me. I always call him Matthew. And Joshua. Not Matt and Josh. But you were known as Matt mostly in high school, right?
Yeah, it's probably shorter. It's more convenient for everybody.
Yeah.
More convenient for everybody.
So Matthew is... Who's Matthew to you?
Matthew is our son.
Yes.
One of the children that I gave birth to. Number 3 for me. Number 4 for you.
Am I? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Number 3.
Number 3.
Yep. So we're here because we're on a Recovery Matters podcast. Tell the audience a little bit about you and how would you describe yourself, and why are you sitting in a Recovery Matters podcast room with your parents?
It's funny. I'm kind of asking myself the same question right now.
I don't blame you.
But yeah, my name's Matthew. I'm the son of these two wonderful parents.
Good start.
I'm a student at North Park University in Chicago, and I'm new to this terminology, but I am a person in recovery for just over 3 months. Mm-hmm. I suffered from alcohol addiction and marijuana addiction, if that's the right terms.
If it works for you.
Yeah, they're the terms you use. So we have some standard questions we ask all our guests, so I'm kind of interested to go through them all with you.
I'm interested to hear them.
Yeah. So we like to say, what was it like for little Matthew? And even that, what was your earliest memory? Have I ever asked you that before? Have you ever asked him what your earliest memory is?
Mm-mm.
My earliest memory. That's a difficult question. I don't know. I guess I have a vivid memory of Joshua and I getting into an argument probably after he beat me in basketball in the driveway, and I remember being extremely emotional. And then I went and found his phone, and I hid it after I hid it from him. Yeah, and I don't know why that's the first memory that came to mind, but I hid his phone behind the speaker, and he ended up finding it later, and then it continued to a physical fight. But
how old were you at the time, do you think?
Probably like 9 or 10.
Wow. Anything earlier?
I do have memories of Race Point, being a very little kid on the beach, kind of running around, skimboarding in Hatches Harbor, we would call it. It was kind of the inlet off of the Atlantic Ocean, that the very tip of the peninsula in Cape Cod.
Massachusetts. And
that's kind of, thinking about it now, it's kind of where my love for the beach and water started. I love being out there and just playing in the water and in the sun and sand, and I think Mom can relate. That's kind of my happy place.
Well, it's funny that a lot of people ask me how many kids I have, and depending on the mood I'm in, I say, well, we had 6, but 2 of them didn't like the beach, so we tossed them back. We didn't, but just saying.
And you say I'm the one that's like controversial. You say, but that's not politically correct at all.
I love our little beach bums, and one of my memories of you on that beach was being in where there was a sandbar. And so I was in the tidal pool in the middle of it, which was up to my waist. And you just decide to walk towards me as a, you probably were 18 months.
Yeah, 18 months.
And you
we were 2 years old.
just kept walking, even when it was over your head. You just walked to me under the water because, you know, you just had no fear of the water, even from the very beginning. You were all in.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
You remember that series of photos I think you took?
On the bucket?
Or no, the one where he was running up the beach in his blue bathing suit and all that
Yeah.
he kept getting closer to you and was running up to ask you something. But we describe you often as the extrovert in the family, that you like to be with people. That's how you recharge. And you were born into a family of introverts. And nothing became more clear the day that we backed that truck. You had to be about that same age, 18 months, 2 years, that same vacation.
2.5 that time, yeah.
Where we backed the truck up to the sand, let everybody out, and then we couldn't find you. You were gone, and we saw you up like 3 or 4 cars. You were sitting on the open tailgate of a truck with an apple juice and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
That did not come from ours.
That
Cooler.
was not ours. Do you remember any of that or doing that or what that was like? I mean, that was really young for you.
Yeah, I mean,
you've heard the stories before.
I've definitely heard these stories, and you know, I think as a kid, you have no fear of judgment or any social anxiety, and you just I liked people. I liked being around people, and so getting to meet new people, and even at, what did you guys say, 2.5? Yeah, I think it was just kind of natural for me, and of course it ended up with me eating a peanut butter and jelly, which sounds about right, but no, yeah, I just have always been drawn to people.
They were drawn to you because they would invite you in, and but you were always the one. What was his technique?
You had a strategy, though.
Yeah,
you would wait, you'd see the vehicle pull up, and you would see what kind of toys were coming out of the back of the vehicle first, and if there were any kids, and then you would gauge which vehicle you were going to approach first.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about me now, but
I don't know either. It was just your nature. You were very social and curious. You know, you just always were. And then you were the only kid that we lost.
Oh. I was confused where I was going for a second, but yes.
At the Atlantic City Boardwalk. Our whole family, his older brother Joshua is what?
27.
8 years older than you?
Yeah.
And so there was this kind of sibling rivalry, I would say. Though I'm being nice. You can maybe go into that a little more. But Joshua was playing soccer on the beach at Wildwood in New Jersey. And we said, we're going to go up to, get an ice cream or go get a...
He was 3.5, and I had a baby in my arms.
Little Mary.
Who was about 6 months old. And you were running around alongside the beach, and then all of a sudden I couldn't find you. And I started asking folks where you were, and some of the kids said, he said he was going to go wash his hands. So the beach is about a half mile wide.
Oh, yeah, it's a long way to the water.
We're not near the water. We're near the boardwalk. And so we're on a panic, and we're looking for you. And then I heard that, and I headed towards the water, and I encountered a lifeguard on an ATV, and I told them about that time. People came running, and they had found you at the top of the stairs on the boardwalk.
Waiting for us.
Because you were ready to go to the water park. And it's, you thought at 3.5 that you could do that by yourself.
You just climbed up the stairs, and when we weren't there, you just sat down and waited for us.
Started thinking what's taking these guys so long.
Exactly.
We were.
Yeah,
Definitely
that sounds about right.
Yeah, but that was the scariest parenting moment I've had so far.
All that aside, though, how would you describe your childhood?
Very blessed.
Yeah.
As a whole. I'm very grateful to grow up in a house that didn't struggle, or at least I knew didn't struggle with money, and 2 loving parents who showed me what it was like to have a healthy relationship and care for their kids. And I'm very grateful for how you guys parented it, or your parenting styles as a whole, which you guys may not even know what they are, but you guys kind of let us figure things out for ourselves. And yeah, I learned a lot. It led me to be pretty independent, but at the same time, I learned how to care for people, and I think a lot of it was based off of your guys' examples. You know, as a little kid, you look up to people who are older than you, and you know, always want to follow that lead. And so, yeah, overall, it was a very loving and blessed childhood.
You had a few struggles, though.
And you don't have to. You can be honest about all that.
As a kid, I was in 3rd and 5th grade. I remember being pretty chubby, and that's when my kind of relationship with food started. I was an overweight kid and kind of, was made fun of a good amount. Do
you attribute that to anything today when you look back at it?
Oh, absolutely.
To what?
I still struggle with how I view my body and my weight, and
And look at you. What are you, 6'3"? How are you?
Yeah, just about 6'3".
And what do you weigh now?
195.
And you're in pretty good shape, right?
Yeah.
And you still struggle with body image.
Exactly.
Which is unusual for a lot of, that's not associated often with like, it's more associated with women than men.
Yeah. And a lot of, and some people would be like, you play sports in college, and, looking at me, it may not often be the case, but it's still a struggle. And now that I'm learning more and more about addiction, and that's when my addiction to kind of food started too, as reflecting on it now, is somewhat a coping mechanism. I remember I'd come home from school after like a long day, and I'd eat like 2 things of Pop-Tarts, a bag of popcorn, whatever I could really find that was comforting. And
easy.
I never really drew the connection to talking about it now, that maybe that was my coping mechanism for a lot of my emotions and feelings at the time. So it's pretty interesting.
So this is when we were on Henry Street, mostly?
No, it was when we moved to our new house. Yeah.
So we moved to the new house, and I don't know who those kids were that were making fun. But where did all this happen most of the time?
Probably at school. Most of the time, yeah. Yeah, definitely at school. And you kind of rub it off. And maybe that's why I don't really have as vivid memories now. I kind of choose to forget them.
Yeah, just like a built-in forgetter. I have some of that too, especially the painful things.
So for me, same thing, same ages, same bullying, and turning to food for comfort, not understanding that was the exact thing that was just going to bring more on. But the same thing happened to me when I hit middle school. As I stretched up, and I didn't see it. I didn't see that I stretched up. I didn't see that I wasn't a chubby kid anymore. And so you went through a big growth spurt after that. Yeah,
definitely. And that's kind of where I found sports and exercise as kind of my outlet for that. So yeah, it definitely was as soon as I stretched out, a lot of the sports came a lot easier. I always enjoyed playing sports, but I was finally I had the athleticism, and I was able to move. And I remember having a conversation with you. I hiked part of the Appalachian Trail with you after 7th grade, going into 8th grade.
Yeah, you were 13.
And that's when I really started to stretch out. And it was like playing soccer was a whole new world, being able to move and feeling like my feet weren't stuck in the mud all the time.
Yeah, you always had tremendous instincts for soccer. Like you could see the field, you knew where to play. But when you got out on the wing, you did not want to run.
Yeah.
You just did not want to run. And I watched you in high school, and was able to watch a game I think at North Park, and you just that was part of your game, is how much you ran and moved, and we even put you in goal because that's where you wanted to be, because you didn't have to move as much.
Yeah, it's funny.
But that's okay. And I think, I mean, you and I talked a little bit about all that and we didn't really know how to address that with you. I don't know that did we ever really?
Well, I didn't want to draw more attention to it by talking about how much he was eating because I'm an overweight mom, right? What do I have to say about this? And honestly, there's a lot of guilt that it's really the genetics from my side of the family that got brought to you, and your 3 older siblings got the skinny Valentine gene and could eat basically what they wanted without any kind of impact that way. So I always had a little bit of like, it's my fault.
Well, I understand. I know, but I don't hold any of that to you. Obviously, I think reflecting on it now, I'm extremely grateful for it. It's taught me a lot about like the right foods to eat and exercise, and kind of one of my passions now is exercise and cooking and nutrition, and I'd like to touch back on that object with the subject about my body image and stuff like that, especially with men. I feel like that's an untalked about topic, especially nowadays. So I think for me, finding healthy outlets and managing that has been pretty important.
So when you look at yourself today, how do you see yourself? Do you still think you're overweight or not fit enough, or what do you see?
There's parts of my body I don't like, and I think there's room for improvement. Like, I wish I had a shredded six-pack. But I do see a lot of improvement, and I'm still kind of learning how to manage that. But yeah, I don't think it's hard to be completely content, but it's learning how to be grateful for the things that your body does do for you,
What? So I've never, I see myself and I look like I have skinny arms and no shoulders left anymore, and I'm not as strong as I used to be, and I got my little pot belly, but I don't think of myself as like, that's just me. I'm very accepting of, and I think you would say I probably always have been, right? I don't really have that.
Yeah.
So what do you?
But again, I think it's.
What do you see?
This is why I don't ever trust anybody who's going to talk to me about eating disorders or fitness or anything that have been skinny their entire life. I just don't, because even when you put on weight later, you have grown up without that experience. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but you just don't have any credibility to me. The people that have credibility are the people that have gotten themselves to a healthy place and
I don't try to tell you what to do I?
No.
Oh.
I'm saying when you go to a nutritionist and they've just always naturally eaten healthy. I mean, we talk about Joshua in our house. From the tiniest kid, he always ate healthy. He never was drawn to unhealthy snacks or eating a lot of food, and there are other reasons for that, but that is not the wiring that my brain had, and so I don't trust anybody that hasn't figured out how to rewire their brain to tell me much.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is, what is it you see when you look in the, what is this body, what is it called? Body
dysmorphia.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, for me, it's looking in the mirror and still seeing kind of that overweight young kid, and it's not like I'm seeing a reflection, like I'm seeing it's seeing like parts of my body that I feel are chubby in certain areas, and it's kind of like a negative, just negative depictions of yourself. And
do you feel shame, or what do you feel when you see that? Do you feel like shame or guilt or dislike, hatred even? What do you feel?
There's some dislike and there's some shame, but I think most of the time the shame is related to when I don't take care of my body properly, when I don't eat well, and when I don't exercise for an extended period of time.
Guilty too?
Yeah.
You haven't taken care of it?
But that might not, and so I think that's probably not the healthiest way of managing it either. I think there's probably more healthy habits I could, like more affirmations I could say to myself and things like that that could really instill that I am exercise and eating healthy is a privilege, that we're all fortunate enough to. One thing I've been saying to myself recently is that I'm fortunate to be able to exercise. It's a gift.
Yeah.
That many people don't have that opportunity. So, just kind of working on that. It's kind of like the thing once you get out of addiction, like with drinking and smoking, that you start to focus on other areas, other things. So I'm kind of in that stage of managing it, figuring it out.
So I was just recently looking, I don't know what happened. I got my iPad got an update, and they send me these like different like photos, like 20 photos that are kind of randomly put together. They're just like photos of the day that just come up, and there are pictures of you, and probably you were at your roundest, let's say, and I just see the same eyes I'm looking at now, I see in that kid too. So I see that, and I see you starting to really be accepting that, especially with both your sisters home over this break, that you're starting to see that it's okay to be like loving, kind, and gentle. That's really one of your strengths. It always has been. Like when we're talking about you being the kid on the beach, very social. And maybe I want to talk a little bit about the years where it started to get really tough for you. And I know you have a diagnosis that you recently came in the last few years. And how did all that start? Where do you think your troubles, if you call them troubles, is it, I don't even know if I'd call them troubles, is a pathway you went down for a while. And how do you think all that started and what happened? Because you had two parents in recovery. You definitely knew where we stood.
A lot of me wants to, my first instinct is to, I don't know if blame's the right word, but attribute a lot of the beginning of that path to the friends I was around. But I don't think that's really a fair analysis. I think more that it might have to do with I don't know, kind of feeling on the outside of not fitting in and wanting to kind of feel like I was a part of a group of friends. And so then once I had some friends who decided to start smoking weed, my initial instinct was to resist. I had two parents in recovery. This was nothing anybody in our family had really experimented with before, as far as I know, besides you guys. But anyways,
she was not a pot smoker.
Anyways,
but that was left for your dad.
But I just felt like I fit in when I did, and eventually it was Halloween night, I think my sophomore year. It sounded like a fun idea to try smoking and go knock on some people's doors for some candy, and
Was it fun?
Well, I didn't even get high that time. But it kind of progressed. So once I first broke that stop saying no. Once I said yes that first time, it kind of progressed.
The barrier.
Yeah, it broke the barrier. That's a good way to phrase it.
It did. That's interesting. I relate to I don't know if I'd blame the kids in high school either, but because we all did that together. It wasn't like one person pushing it or anything. And I was thinking we have the 77 BC, the class of 77 Breakfast Club, and a lot of those people that I drank with in high school are sitting around this table, and most of them are sober. I mean, maybe there's one or two that drink a beer here and there because they said, I'm done with that. But other people claim 20, 25, 35 years of recovery. I'm thinking of 3 or 4 people at the table already.
Yeah.
So it's kind of miraculous in and of itself. I know for me, and Sandy, you and I have talked about this, that I was filled with this social anxiety that wasn't diagnosed until I was like 20 years in recovery or something, or 15 years in recovery, and a woman said, "Oh, you had social anxiety." I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
But I just knew that I was, had the sweaty armpits and the acne, and the more I thought about the acne, the more my armpits sweat, and it just was a circle. And what made that go away was the first time I drank.
Yeah.
The anxiety was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my fear of my father was the only reason I didn't drink until I was a senior, halfway through my senior year of high school. It's the only reason. I was more afraid of him than my discomfort was. But once I said yes to that, then
that's fascinating you say that, because I had this fear that I had put in place, but I got caught drinking a few times, and there was no punishment, really. There was no consequences from my parents, so I quickly learned not to worry about that. I just kind of pushed that aside, and then I was off and running. So talk a little bit, did you have anxiety, do you think, or was it more of a fitting in thing?
Definitely. And I think that's kind of social anxiety in itself, that need to fit in and not feeling like I belonged. And so that led me to want to smoke with my boys. And
but you were only like the only group in school in high school that was smoking, right?
Well, maybe initially, but no. Obviously, marijuana, weed is very popular now, especially in kids my age. So definitely not the only group.
So in high school, roughly, what do you think? What percentage of kids smoked weed? Roughly, if you had to just throw a number out there.
Maybe 30 to 40%. Yeah.
Huh.
Probably around there. I remember
obviously. Josh saying as a freshman he was the only person he knew that hadn't tried it.
It's probably higher. People definitely try it, but I consider people who smoke consistently.
30 to 40% are what would be heavy users or daily users, kind of.
Probably.
So what was it like for you coming home after the first time, or in the early weeks?
I didn't. Most of the time I stayed over somewhere. Out of just fear of you guys and letting you guys down. Not that, I was so unusual in our family, and, and then it kind of just progressed. I think the summer after my junior year was when it really was when I first got really addicted and started to use it more daily.
Was there any event that might have triggered all that?
I don't know. I think there was a break, like a week or two break in between work. I work at a summer down camp, and there was a week or two break between work and
school.
In school, yeah. So school had just ended in June, and we didn't really know what to do. So I think there's one day where we just spent the whole day kind of smoking. And then after that, it was like, this is fun. And then it kind of progressed throughout that whole summer. Knowing what I know now, it was more, the fun part was the connection. So we had talked about it. We had talked about it first thing with me being on the beach, my love for people and being drawn to people. And smoking was a gateway, and a gateway to that, to form connections with people I cared about and still care about. And so, but knowing now, it was actually kind of tearing me up inside and my anxiety. And every time I smoked, I was paranoid, but I wasn't willing to admit that until I sort of became self-aware towards the end of my smoking. I would get super paranoid, on edge, especially social. Like my social anxiety was heightened. It's like tenfold whenever I would smoke. I would always be hyper aware of what I was saying and what other people were saying and how it was being received, and just filled with this kind of pit of paranoia, and
I do know.
yeah.
I can relate to that. Do you think your mom and I knew what was going on?
You knew. I think I knew at the time you knew, but I don't think you knew to the extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that summer it became a daily thing. Every time after work, I would find a way, or go hang out somewhere. It was most likely I was smoking.
Were you hoping we would call you out before we did?
In the beginning, I don't think so, but towards the end, when it got pretty ugly, yeah, I think definitely.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest nights was when Samantha came downstairs and told us she smelled cannabis smoke in the hallway upstairs. That was probably where the veil of denial for me, because the fact that you would take that risk in the house, it was important to you to use.
I don't know if it was important to me or if it was a necessity. The addiction progressed so far that it was a need, and I had just gone through a rough breakup. My mind was kind of all over the place, and the only way I knew how to cope with my feelings for the last 2 years was to go smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so it resulted in that, and that was still one of the most, that was a rough night.
So you say your mind is all over the place, and you've discovered something about your mind jumping from all over the place. What is that?
That's a great segue. You know what you're doing.
I've done a few podcasts or two.
So the end of my senior year when COVID hit and we were doing online school, I kind of discovered that I had attention deficit disorder, so ADD, and more so when I was younger, but still a little bit now, ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactive disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that out.
And how did you find that out?
I took an online test, and then
who did you ask to take that online test?
I asked you to take it?
I did.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I realized I answered yes to a lot of those questions.
Yeah.
And I realized that, and I've talked about this on the podcast, that the executive director role, because that I've been here at CCAR for 23 years this month, it's a lot of jumping from like one thing to one thing to one thing, a lot of things to keep my attention. And so it's actually, I found that a job to fit my that kind of condition that I never really realized I had.
That's probably why you've been so successful.
You took a big breath when we talked about this.
Well, I just wanted to mention too, but that we took the online test, and then we did go to a doctor and got diagnosed officially. So,
And you're on medication.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was,
You gave me the look like I should ask that.
No, I was just going to interject something, but it's okay.
No, I want you to interject.
So one of the things that during that season when you finally got diagnosed, you said you had been telling me that for years. So just, to connect like a mom guilt. But the reason my misunderstanding of ADHD was A, I thought school would pick it up before anybody else. B, you always got grades. You always went to school. You always got remarkable compliments from your teachers of what a great contributor you were in the classroom. And I wasn't educated enough to know how it plays out, that it doesn't always play out, particularly when you're older. It doesn't always play out like that. Doesn't mean that the person's not doing well in school, isn't well behaved at school. And so it was a real eye-opener for me, an epiphany, and to figure out the things that I need to do differently. And I'm still working on that and still not doing great at it, but to be more supportive.
I think to say that you're not doing great at it is harsh. I think I appreciate all of what you just said is the most important part to me. And I think the willingness to learn, and you guys have expressed that more so than anything these past 2 years, is you've always supported and I've learned, one of the most grateful things I've learned from you guys is your willingness to grow and keep learning, not only as people, but as husband and wife and parents and leaders in your work. And that's the most important part. You may not be perfect, but if you can admit that you're learning, that's I think is encouraging, and I'm very grateful for.
Thank you, Maddie. I think one of the things I've learned from the parents that I had who weren't open to learning, and just being, that I spend my days working with college students and learning from each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can't stop learning and growing and changing. We just can't.
So I do want to dive into this, your use a little bit more. And you talked a lot about weed, but when did alcohol enter the picture, and what did that do for you? And where did it lead
they
you?
eventually came hand in hand. So I think weed was always more common because I could drive while I was high, but I never risked drinking.
He's not looking at you about that one.
So I knew I didn't have to stay over a friend's house is my point. I didn't have to stay over because that was always another that would cause me anxiety asking you guys to stay over somewhere because, I knew.
Once you did that, we knew.
Dad was always had your number on
that. But, I wish sometimes I had asked more, but what was the question again?
Alcohol.
Oh, okay, yes.
How that started and where that led you.
Yeah, so it kind of started the summer after I graduated. We had just gotten in some relief from the pandemic-ish. I was with a lot of my friends from high school. We wanted to kind of celebrate senior year, as many people may be able to relate to. And so there's a lot of parties, a lot of alcohol, a lot of weed, and just kind of carried on. And then throughout all of this, a vaping addiction went kind of hand in hand with everything as well.
Yeah, you got caught smoking in the boys' room at school. That wasn't a good day either.
I was younger.
Yeah, that was, no. Yeah.
And you know what was really funny? So when that happened, I got the phone call to come pick you up, right? That you had got caught vaping in the boys' room. And I remember saying to the athletic director, clearly not thinking clearly, I'm like, nicotine? Really? Gosh, I thought if he was going to try something, he'd try cannabis. And he's like, really? And I'm like, what did I just say? Like, I'm such an idiot. But I was like, what? Like, why would he intentionally hurt his lungs when he's an athlete?
Yeah, but the part that broke you was getting removed from the basketball team for that period of time. Oh my gosh. So you were broken. I mean, that really hurt you. Hurt you.
And we thought, oh, well, great. He's had this life lesson early. I did.
I didn't, because I saw, sometimes you can see the punishment is not helpful. Because it was more of it was just a shameful, and it's hard to pull a lesson out of that when you get hurt that badly, when it may not needed to have been. I think a lot of times coaches and systems don't understand the profound healing effect that sports has, especially for many people. So remember, like when we had Avery on Joshua's team, and his mom would use it as punishment that he couldn't come to practice or play in games when he misbehaved. And I was like, I talked to her and finally convinced her that this is where he needed to be. It wasn't kicked off the team, because what's he going to go do if he can't play the sport? What's going to be the alternative? It's not. And you were just, and I don't think I know you had and you love basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you really, and you understood that game really well, and and that kind of broke your spirit for it.
Yeah.
And then you kind of drifted away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Gave it a go a few more times, but just kind of hit you really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was not, I learned a lot from that experience, but, it's one of those things where I kind of chose to forget if that's, because I didn't even think about it. I kind of forgot about it until you guys brought it up, but, and that's kind of where one of my good friends, Mike, and I really connected to is through that. We got caught in the bathroom together.
Yeah.
But it was, and it was, I replayed it a lot in my head, how unfortunate it was, but it was also a very dumb decision reflecting on it.
Oh, teenagers aren't known for always making the best decisions, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, he's still a teenager for a couple weeks.
I know. Well, yeah.
So you graduated high school, you're
Mm-hmm.
partying over the course of the summer, you got accepted to a lot of schools, and surprise upon surprise, you chose to go to a small Christian school in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember, so that previous November, we went to Kenya to visit Sammy. And that's when when we were in the Masai Mara, I remember getting a kind of like nudge from God that North Park was the right choice.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No.
I didn't know that.
And, I kind of flirted with the idea of going to UConn and, a little bit of pressure that it was free tuition.
But I also had a fair balance of fear about you going to UConn.
Yeah, so it balanced out, and so did I. I kind of, I was at the point where I was so in the midst of my addiction that I knew this was a shot for me to kind of draw myself out of it. I needed to get out of Manchester, out of Connecticut, out of my comfort zone, and go to Chicago and create this whole new experience. And so I slowly started to.
So that wasn't like a miracle cure when you went out there.
No, it wasn't.
Well, first semester was online.
Yeah.
Your first semester, it was like in the heart of the pandemic. You got misdiagnosed and then accurately diagnosed and isolated, and oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I have a vivid memory of me thinking to myself that when I moved in and I met my roommate David, that I had a feeling that my life is going to change here. And a lot of it was meeting David, and he played a big role in that, whether I don't even think he notices it, but just from his love for the Lord. And he had this inner joy and contentment that I was just drawn to, and very grateful for his relationship. And that kind of taught me a lot in what it would look like to not have substance or not drink and not smoke, because that's not a part of David's life or anything he does. So, I remember I had an inner feeling that my life is going to change here.
But you weren't quite done.
Nope.
Because you came back home to Manchester for the summer.
Winter break. Long winter break.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that first semester I had a false positive COVID test, and then I ended up getting in trouble because I had too many close contacts, as I was in a not really a party, but like a small gathering, and at the time it was against school policy, so I ended up getting in trouble, and that was another like wake up call. I was like, gosh, this is not helping. But then I didn't smoke anymore when I got to college, and then I would still drink on the weekends, and I justified it by it only being on the weekends. And so then I ended up in quarantine for 10 days because of a false positive COVID test with 3 Norwegians on the soccer team. And that was it was a rough experience. And then,
Because English was not the primary
Yes,
language
no.
in that apartment.
but I still love those guys. And then we moved to a couple weeks later. David gets COVID, and I think I have the antibodies because I had a positive COVID test. But turns out that it was I find out it's a false positive and actually get pretty sick, and then have to spend another 10 days in my room. And so that was a rough semester. But yeah, then
Rough for anybody.
Yeah.
Rough for us because we didn't know, we were helpless.
Yeah.
What could we do?
Yeah, but then I came home for winter break, and that's it was a long break from Thanksgiving to
Mid-January.
mid-January, and that was a good period of growth, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then the drinking continued all the way to that summer.
Yeah. So what changed? What to do? What resonated with you to make the change to say now that you're a person in recovery for 3 months or so?
Yeah, so it was funny. I remember talking with Megan, my girlfriend now, and when we were in North Carolina, I was driving her to the airport. That whole summer I wanted to commit to not drinking and doing anything. But it was always that third week. I could go 2 weekends, but I could never get past that third weekend. And so then the week before we went on vacation, it was kind of a low point. Went to a party, had a really bad experience there with there was a lot of drama and a lot of stuff going down. And I was like, the next day I reflected on it, and it was, why am I continuing to put myself in these situations? How am I benefiting from it? I was kind of coaching myself. And then I got to school, drinking continued for a week or two. And then I went out this one night. They had this, it was off the Western stop off the Brown line. It's called German Fest. So you can imagine what they do at a German Fest.
Right.
Some suds.
They drink a lot of beer. And so I got pretty drunk. I went out to a bar with some friends. They didn't card, so that's how I was able to get in. And, the whole time I was just asking myself kind of, why am I here? What do I get out of this? Like, how is this benefiting me? And, and then the next week was when I started to go through the stages of change.
Yeah, listen to you.
Yeah.
So one of the things you said even as of a few weeks ago, that your goal was to stay sober through the end of the semester.
Mm-hmm.
And where are you now? What are your goals for your recovery?
From that night, September 10th, I have not had a drink or a drug. Is that how they say it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A drink or smoked since that day. And it took a lot of talking with friends, a lot of support from Megan, my girlfriend at school, and encouragement from you guys, and talking with family. And then I really connected. My thought process was like, how am I gonna change this habit I had, this thing that took up a lot of my time, with something positive? And so I reassessed, kind of assessed where I was at, and one thing I was lacking was my spiritual connection, my connection with my higher power.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, it'd be a good idea if I switched the two.
Mm-hmm.
If I started to just really kind of dive into my spirit and my faith, and replace something negative, which was drinking, with something positive like my faith, and something that's very powerful.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I love the simplicity of it.
It was easier said than done.
So that led you to the gospel choir?
Yeah, it did. Megan was like, you should come to the gospel choir. She thinks I'm a lot better singer than I am, and so she encouraged me to come. I went to one practice. Afterwards, I was like, or throughout it, I was like, I was confused why I was here. I was like,
again, why am I here?
I kind of was like, is this really, something I do? But then I came back the next week and I started to love it more and more. And it was really a fulfilling time. And I looked forward to every Tuesday singing worship with other believers, and it was a really fulfilling experience. Shout out to Pastor TJ. He was a ton of fun and led the group really well along with Steve. So it was a lot of fun.
So you're doing that. You're playing on the reserve team, Division III soccer team. You're on a regional championship winning ultimate frisbee team.
Sounds good when you say it like that.
And going to class, right?
Yeah.
So you are still very busy.
But that was also something I knew I had to do. Sure you guys can attest to it. The times when I was in season in high school and busy, I was often more content.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to just fill my life up with things I enjoyed doing.
Exactly.
And so the less free time I had, the less time I knew I couldn't be drinking, and the less time my mental health was more content and in a better spot.
As I work with college age students, I completely understand, because I was 26 when I made the decision. It's a ginormous decision to say, I am never going to use substances for the rest of my life when you haven't lived much life yet.
Yeah.
And I always just encourage them to just not do it today, right? Is your life getting better or worse based on using and not using?
And so I knew that too. I knew if I said that I was never going to drink again on September 10th for the rest of my life, I would have.
Oh yeah.
I probably would have returned to use. But my goal is to make it to the end of the semester. It was something that was shorter term, something that I could attain, and something that I could celebrate. And then I would reevaluate from there. Because the commitment to saying I wasn't going to drink for the rest of my life was scary to me. And I was afraid that if I did that, I knew myself well enough, I was self-aware enough to know that I would probably return to drinking and substance. And I was scared. I was scared to see what that would have done.
What is your life like today?
It's a lot better. I'm still, just because I got rid of alcohol and substance in my life doesn't mean I don't struggle with everyday anxiety and things like that. But I am much better equipped in learning how to manage that.
How do you manage it?
Exercise is a big one. I know the days where I wake up and go to the gym is a big thing. So taking care of my physical health, eating well, connecting with people. So over this break, I've really focused on my relationship with you guys and my sisters. Some, and a lot of which were not sacrificed, but hurt, kind of stunted and not valued as highly, I would say, when I was using. And then
I can tell you this, that your mother and I often, we can't think of a greater gift than listening to you with Sammy and Mary. The three of you together. There's not a greater gift to us.
Laughing, yelling, singing, dancing.
It's not anything we're doing. It's that you guys have each other. And, the three of you are so good together that you're even starting to affect the older brother, which, with Joshua, which, he's married, he's off in another part, but what you have is really attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how proud I am of you, because previous behavior you would have left.
Mm-hmm.
And how often have you been home this whole time break? Like almost the whole time, right?
Yeah, I think I went to the movies once.
Yeah, or something. And
But
went
yeah.
out another time, but you've been, and you seem content. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem like it's torture for you to be home. You seem like you're enjoying relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the company. Whether we're playing cards or watching a movie or doing that puzzle that you guys were all crazy about the other day.
Never seen my kids do a whole puzzle in my life.
But what is that like for you? Is that different for you? How do you feel about all that?
Oh, definitely.
Are your friends wondering where you are?
A little bit, but it's been very powerful, I think. And I knew coming home that was something I wanted to work on, because it's something
You didn't even know Sam was going to be
No,
home.
I didn't, but even with Mary and you guys, it was something that I knew I had some, I don't know if regret's the right word, but some regret, wanted to make up for time I had missed. As they say that your siblings are your lifelong friends. You can't really get rid of them. And so just trying to just be a good brother, and I think, that was one of my main focuses.
You know how much they love you.
I know.
They do.
You also decided to go to the Recovery Coach Academy, which was pretty cool, and you're in the second week. What made you decide to do it, and how are you feeling about it?
I think Dad posted something actually on his Instagram story, and I saw the dates, and I was like, it's 12 to 2. It's the 2 weeks I'm home for break. It's a short class, so I know I could probably pay attention most of the time.
Well, it's Manchester United's playing.
Yeah, well, you don't need to.
Yeah, no.
But no, and I really wanted to kind of look at what recovery meant to me. It wasn't something that I wasn't one of my focuses when I was at school, like when I got into recovery, but kind of wanted to connect with other people who had a similar experience. And just kind of, one thing I'm learning from this academy is that, and I'm very grateful for, is that it's an overall learning how to connect to every person, every types of, all walks of people, no matter your ethnic background, your religion, your gender identity. It's just learning how to connect. And I think, like we talked about earlier, me being that little kid on the beach, I've always just wanted to connect with others. And so I'm very grateful for it. And the instructor's not too bad as well.
So,
yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't lead it, Maddie. I'm sorry you got Dad.
Where do you see the immediate future for you? What's it look like? What are you planning on doing?
Well, we're going to Florida in a week.
Yeah.
That should be fun. I'm excited for that. But, go back to school. It's our off season for soccer, so I'll be playing ultimate frisbee, maybe some soccer on the side, and who knows? I think my first goal is to get my degree. So I'll
What's your degree in?
Exercise science. So I might want to become a personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach. Who knows? But start there, and whatever God has in store, we'll figure that out. He'll figure that out for me.
Yeah.
Well, that I don't mean this in the wrong way. We raised you, so we know you from when you were the little toddling around, asking questions incessantly, curious, inquisitive.
It's a big word.
Yeah, and you are. That's your nature, because we know your nature. And I think what you've discovered, you went down a path, and you're coming out of the woods, if you will, onto a new path. is that I think you're asking yourself all the right questions. How does this benefit me? And I think you'll evolve to how does this benefit others?
Mm-hmm.
You know, drinking doesn't, it might benefit you, but it's also a very selfish behavior in a lot of ways because you're drowning out your sorrows or your anxiety, and it's not really helping anybody else. As a matter of fact, you might connect with other people who are in the same boat and doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But the big question for me now, for a long time, has been how can I be of service to others?
Yeah.
Because when you're out in service to others, then you're outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I'm at my healthiest. And I think you're starting to explore that. So these ideas of like being a personal trainer or an exercise coach, or I've talked to you about being a team coach of some kind. I think with your skills, you'd be great at that as well. You'd be, you know, I'd even think, I don't know if I could say this, but, you know, if it was all up to me, you'd be an excellent recovery coach that I would love to have work here if that was something you wanted to do, but who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're on the right track. You always thought he was going to be, like a
Therapist?
psychologist or a therapist or a counselor of some kind.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that you did early on, and this was even before 2010, right? So over 11 years ago, you would have been 8, is we would go hiking. And I am not, you know, as physically agile, and you would always make sure that I was okay. You would always stay in the back. You know, Dad be forging ahead, doing whatever, but you'd come back and make sure I climbed over the log. And it's just always been your nature to make sure everybody was brought along, that everybody was okay. And so there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways, and I think you're figuring those out.
Yeah.
When I talk to a lot of parents who are looking at their child's use and not knowing how to help, you know, and I have my thoughts that I share with them, but what would you tell us or other parents similar to us about what is supportive? They can't fix it, right, necessarily, but what is supportive when you see your child going down these roads?
That's a great question. I think, you know, as hard as it may be, I think you kind of have to let your kid explore that for themselves. You know, and that's scary to say. And I understand how that is, that their initial safety may be at harm, but and when your child comes to you with willing to talk about it, ask good questions, show you like that you care and are curious, and just still showing that you care for them, even that they're using was something that is probably one of the main reasons I'm clean. If you guys didn't express your love for me, and it would have pushed me further away, you know? So just continue to, I guess my advice would be continue to care and love for them, and tell them that you love them, whilst giving them their space to figure it out, you know?
Yeah, I will say it's been the hardest parenting thing in terms of doing things opposite of what a lot of other parents might tell me. We even had one of our adult children tell me we were not handling things right, that we should, you know, be laying down the law and running the house properly and restricting and doing all of those things. And so in my upbringing was all about that, right? Like rules, you're going to get, I never broke them, but you're going to get, till I was a senior in high school, you're going to get grounded, you're going to lose this, you're going to do that. And, but I just knew I had never seen those things work. I had never seen fear, like that fear ultimately will work the longest. But there was plenty of nights I went to bed afraid.
Well, I remember those conversations too. I said, what would likely be the response of the person who's using if you continue to clamp down on them? It's one of resentment. But there was a time, I told you, do you want to still live here?
Mm-hmm. I remember that very, very vividly.
Because that was starting to be a threat to my recovery and your mom's recovery.
I wasn't ready for that. By the way, like that was.
I was.
I know you were, but I'm saying that was one of those times where
I also knew how bright he is, and he would process all that and figure something out. So
yeah, but I was close. I had a decision that night where there was part of me that
I know
almost left.
I know.
But yeah, I think they're only gonna eventually your kid's gonna have to leave your guidance, and so you can only watch over them for so long.
Yeah, we're raising adults. We're not raising children. So there were times where you had to make your decision.
Yeah.
It would have been your decision. If you had left, it would have been a really hard road for you, and part of you knew that. Mm-hmm. Part of you knew it wasn't going to be fun staying at home, but it was probably going to be a better decision for the time being.
At least I'd know where my food was coming from.
Yeah, or something, right?
Yeah. Well, Maddie, I am just so proud of everything. And I'm most proud that you're exploring. Like you're using that same curiosity of seeing what toys are coming out on the beach, just seeing what works for you, because there's no one package that works best for every single human, and it's just figuring out those pieces that come together that allow you to really just enjoy your life.
You're seeking, and that's what continue to seek, and really continue to seek what God wants you to do. I guess the last thing that I would say to you is we've had a lot of discussions about leadership, and I feel you're a natural leader. I mean, you've shown that time and time again on the soccer field. It's just one place where you're selected captain and by your mates and all that. So you're a leader. You can't get around that. What you do with it is up to you. And the last thing is, and I say this to everybody that comes in CCAR, and I've told you before, but I believe in you with all my heart and soul and the depth of my love for you, that I believe in you. And I believe you can figure this out. And I also am your safety net, and I can help you whenever you need it. You know that, right?
I do.
And I love you.
Thank you both for saying that. I love you too.
Love you, Maddie boy.